Hello and welcome to the Michael Mama Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwar Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Looks like we're going to get some rain today, maybe even some snow, I don't know. So I forget where I recently saw this quote that, of course, we're all familiar with. Discretion is the better part of valor. And it, well, there are two things that inspired me really to want to talk about it in this podcast. And one of them is that it's Thanksgiving weekend. And the other is just the news in the world today and really people's behavior. You know, there's a certain level of commitment to a person's worldview or their perspective. And it seems like in the past decades, and I almost feel like it's related somehow to the drug culture or something where, you know, people just, it's almost like a paranoia or a self-righteousness or something. They get so caught up in their head and their perspective. And now it's permeated all of society where it's not even about if people are doing drugs or not. It's like they get this mindset and they think, okay, there it is, that's truth. And courage, valor, has to do with speaking your truth and claiming it and standing up for your perspective and fighting, basically. And I found it interesting that I actually looked up the word valor, and the common definition is courage, which, I mean, it takes out the discretionary part of the word valor, which is the real essence of the meaning. And that is that there's a commitment to divinity within. And that's really being valorous, is when you're doing that. But it's not about a worldview or perspective or forcing it on another person. It's more about wisdom. And so discretion has to do with, you know, knowing when to speak, when not to speak, knowing what to say. And that has a lot to do with having some sense of what they're willing to hear and what sort of response it will elicit in them, regardless of whether or not you're right. It just seems like it's out the window. And now with Thanksgiving, to get to the other, so that's in the news, obviously, you know, people are standing up and taking these sides, which doesn't matter how preposterous they are. They consider themselves valorous if they can just spout it out. But now, the other reason that I was inspired to bring this up is because of Thanksgiving weekend. Because, you know, there's a real common theme, if you could say, or subcurrent of holiday weekends in general. Christmas is coming up, where when the families get together, you know, somebody will speak out their opinion. For some reason, that's normally associated with an uncle, isn't it, Scott?
Oh yeah.
but and then it creates a polarization, and people end up being angry at each other, and the whole thing like that. And so it's just a righteous indignation, you know. That uncle has this righteous perspective, and he spouts it out and polarizes, and then arguments start, and people all leave not even liking each other as much as before they got together. And so we do well, not just on holiday weekends, but all the time. In fact, it's a great motto, isn't it? Discretion is the better part of valor. We all have perspectives, we all have convictions, we all have feelings about this and about that, and about him and about her. But where does discretion come in? And really, it's wisdom. When you have the wisdom to implement that action, And when it just makes more sense not to, perhaps because they're not going to hear it anyway, or perhaps because it'll create polarization. And so then, to get back to Dhanurveda, I thought this was really interesting because I've talked about Dhanurveda in the past couple of podcasts, which is basically the art of action, generally expressed as the term of archery, the art of archery. But we've talked about how it applies to all aspects of life. And there's a line in there that I like. It's basically Dhanurveda inspired. It says, "Let steady precision carry you." You know, not strength. It's not about strength. It's about steady precision. That almost makes me think of the Mona Lisa smile, you know. She knew true valor. She had her perspectives, but she knew when to speak it out and when not to, and how to say it, and what to say and what not to say. And let steady precision carries you. That's Dhanurveda. In other words, it applies to all aspects of life. I don't care what you're doing. If you're archery or it came up actually in my study of sumo deadlifts that I talked about, and how it's just steady precision. It's not even about strength. Life and success in life isn't that much about strength. It's more about steady precision. It's more about discretion. When to speak, when not to speak, what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. That's all discretion. And it has very little, if anything, to do with righteous indignation. That's the polar opposite. I could go on and on, but I think that's it in a nutshell. Scotty, you have anything you want to say or add or ask or anything in regard to this?
Well, as you were talking about the change that kind of happened over time, I remember being a product of the late 60s and how the structure of things when the country was thriving were being like loosened. Um, where in school or coaches or wherever people were kind of rebelling against that structure. And then I
And
remember feeling, yeah,
that came about with the drug
yeah.
rebellion, didn't it?
Well, I don't know back then because I was just a kid, but
Uh-huh.
but I just remember in school wanting like I'm thinking, God, wow, this is so strict, and wanting it to be looser, and
Yes.
then um just a feeling, you
That's
know,
interesting. That's a good point.
and then all of a sudden when we got looser, things started to break down, or it just, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and that's because you see, uh, discretion isn't a rule book. You know, I mean, I get the thought from what you're saying, like this very Victorian, strict school teacher. All these rules: behave this way, don't behave that way, do this, don't do. And that's and that then undermines just the naturalness of life, the natural flow of life. I remember there was this one guy who went to this Ayurvedic doctor. This was in India, and this guy was very prim and proper, and he always looked like he's wearing a suit if he was or not, you know. And his he always articulated very clearly. It's just the way he was. And so this Ayurvedic doctor took his pulse, you know, and was evaluating his physiology, and he said, "You should say ha, and more." Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, there's a naturalness. So discretion isn't uh, a real strict rule book or a very narrow viewpoint in life. It's wisdom. We're talking about wisdom. And along those same lines, you know, a lot of people think if they throw around wise quotes, then they're wise. Or if they read a book about Veda and then they understand Veda and it's the I get it syndrome, and so they get it. And so they're wise. And discretion comes from a deeper place. Wisdom comes from a deeper place. You find that within yourself. Well, it's Thanksgiving weekend. I imagine a lot of families are together, so I want to keep this short. I could go on and on about this, but I think that's, considering the weekend and all, I think we'll leave it right there. Good enough, Scotty?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening.